Hey guys, this is Chris with the Unshakable Man podcast and community. I am here today with Braedyn Stockfish. Braedyn and I met through Dan Doty's Ring of Fire group men's program for men's work facilitators. It wasn't just men or people who identify as male or female. It was practitioners who worked with men. And I think one of the reasons for hosting these podcasts, really it comes out from all of the conversations, is I feel like we have these deeply authentic, intimate experiences in these containers, but then in the default world, we show up in different ways, right? We show up with the mask that we wear. We show up with however we've learned to protect ourselves. And so much so that we don't know that we are. And what I see happening in these conversations is just getting to talk about that work with other men who have experienced it in their own practice. And Braedyn is a fellow men's work practitioner. He's a coach. I know that you run the Grounded Man community. And I'm really excited, man. I'm excited to invite you in here and to talk about internal family systems, to talk about self-leadership, right? And I'd put self-leadership at the top of all of it, but being authentic, what we were already getting into. I know you had mentioned wanted to maybe talk about sex and masturbation. That's definitely an area of fertile ground for our community, and boundaries and creativity. But I guess, like, without further ado, man, welcome in, Braedyn. It's just such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. And yeah, there's a lot of juicy topics there to get
Yeah,
into. I like the pun of
yeah.
fertile ground for getting into sex and masturbation.
I didn't know it was a pun, but yeah, that is definitely a pun. So that works. That works. So Braedyn, like, how did you come to get into this work?
Yeah, it's been a journey for sure. For me, I think there's a couple pieces that really brought me to men's work for myself, getting into the space of growing up through my life. I really felt a deeper connection with women. It was always easier to connect with my mom and my sister, and then girls through dating and connection in that way. I certainly had male friends through sports and growing up in those ways, but there
Mm-hmm.
was a lot of male and brotherhood wounding that happened where my trust kind of eroded through a lot of childhood traumas with men that led me to feeling like, I couldn't be who I authentically am in the space of men. And so I
Mm-hmm.
really guarded up that wall for a lot of my life. And it took me until I was in my early 20s to really realize how much guarding there was around my heart and how much I was missing and lacking that like deep masculine connection. And so it started with that craving of wanting a deeper relationship with men where I can share my experience, my traumas, my vulnerabilities, my desires and dreams,
Yeah.
and like have that intimate circle. And so that's what kind of brought me into engaging in men's work. And um, yeah, I've always kind of felt like a bit of a leader and people look to me. And so it wasn't long after getting into that
Mm-hmm.
space that I was invited to start hosting and holding that space for other men to step into as well. And yeah, that's probably the big driver. There's another piece I feel I want to mention that is, yeah, very dear. A woman in my life experienced sexual abuse, and the anger and the frustration that comes with that, and the
Mm.
helplessness and feeling like, wow, I'm so sick of the idea that
Yeah.
this is still happening in our world with men and
So
women.
sick.
Yeah. And so there's a desire there of like, hey, I want to lead something in a different direction of how can we take responsibility for ourselves, because I know someone doing that is they just need space and love and to be heard, because they're so confused and they have no idea what's right or wrong. And so giving that space and showing what a man can be, I think is important
Wow.
too.
Wow. I just noticed like my own, I just said wow. And I noticed openness and attention in my shoulders. You're just, and then the story in my head of noticing your ability to empathize with, and I'm going to use the word perpetrator, right? Like I believe it was a man or person who identifies as male who perpetrated a sexual assault, right? And but to the ability to even acknowledge, and for me it's the phrase that we'll often hear in this work of like there's only love and calls for love, right? And how doing that, your ability to empathize that and to look deeper within to that person must be so hurt and have been, and to be so misguided so as to act in that way. It's pretty, I sense fear and in at being misunderstood, like in the blogosphere, right? Like in the manosphere, like in people listening to this podcast. And yet, like, as I even recognize that fear, like, it's like, that is what we need, right? Like we need men who are able to hold, right, the full emotional spectrum of experience for others, right, to show
Absolutely.
them the way. And I also love hearing that like you were invited, right? Like you were invited into this work. And I think I hear that from so many men who I get to hold space and share space with. And it just makes sense like why I was so excited to chat with you, because it's that I see that is like a common thread in this work and on the path, like being an open-hearted leader. Um, we can try our best to get our way into this work, but really it's like you're following a sensation. You're being invited in by the fundamental space that you live in, right? Like all the community, whatever. And if you answer that call, it's a big deal. It's to be appreciated.
Well, thank you for acknowledging that. And yeah, I think it's like we touched on before, kind of diving in here, is that authenticity of self when you're showing up and paying attention to your body and your heart and bringing that out in a vulnerable and authentic way without that like push for reaching for something, like reaching for attention, reaching for fame, success. It's like when we really just show up as we are, then that's kind of when the invitation seems to unfold and welcome us to more, rather than like that like aggressive push for more, right?
Yeah, you've mentioned your heart a few times, and I wanted to know like when did you first begin to identify with or to become aware of your heart?
Hmm.
When did you even start using language like that as a man?
Yeah, I would say it's been more integrated in the last 5 years. But what
Hmm.
comes up for me with that question is actually in like, the dark night of the soul, in the belly of the
Hmm.
whale. So I struggled quite a bit with substance use in my late teens and early 20s. And so there was a point that I can like distinctly remember being at one of my ultimate lows and just feeling very disconnected from my body. And there was a voice in there that would whisper like, you're going to be okay, hold on, don't give up here, come back to
Mm.
love. And that was definitely my heart. That was this deeper knowing. And so I think that's the
Mm.
first connection that I had, and that was what allowed me to start waking up, as we use the term, and from there like building that into my language and knowing that that's something that is so important to me to check in with, because
Hmm.
they've never left. My heart has never left.
Yeah. It's just to me and to any men who, or anyone who's listening to this, like the culture of masculinity that we exist in, the culture of manhood. I'll use the word manhood, the culture of manhood to differentiate from being masculine or feminine, right? But the just your what I notice or what I see in you with like your, even as you said, like it just started to integrate, is like allowing yourself to be open, tender, sensual, and to feel your heart, right? To sense the quality of that energy within your body in that space just completely goes against the culture of manhood, right? This toughening, this stoicism, this like confidence through bravado, through shielding, through acquiring more intellectual knowledge, through like gathering medals to place on the front of you, that to right. And I want to point that out because it's like it's important to me in talking about self-leadership and in talking about internal family systems, parts of self, just like to shine a light on those examples of like, this is a felt thing. Like I, and look at you, like you got your shirt off. You're like the picture of like a surfer dude living in Nicaragua right now. I feel jealous as I say that because I want to live in Nicaragua for a period of time and go surfing on a regular basis. So like, could you speak to that? Could we talk about that like juxtaposition of manhood being tough, looking tough? You said that people look to you as a leader, and yet in this space here, you seem like a pretty tender, pretty soft, pretty vulnerably open guy, which is a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. It opens up so much for me as I feel there's so much excitement in my body of speaking on this, and
Yeah.
it's uh,
Should I take my shirt off too?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, the piece I think that comes up for me first there is it feels like that culture of manhood, and you kind of define that rigidity and that um, that strongness, that machismo almost,
Mm-hmm.
bravado. It's to me a dying culture, or a transforming culture that is, because there's something about that is incomplete on its own, right? And I don't want to bash those qualities. Those are very good qualities
Mm.
for a man to have, is to be
Uh,
able to have power and anger and strength and hold boundaries, and to be tough when the moment calls for toughness.
mm-hmm.
And it's important to be able to be soft, to be tender, to open up, love, to connect deeply with fellow men, with women, with children in a way
Mm-hmm.
that invites love, invites expansion, invites connection. And that for me is something much softer. And I would, yeah, also want to hesitate like mistaking that softness and that tenderness for a lack of power or strength, right?
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you are bringing in both sides, because one of the things when I mean, we talk about the man box within the Unshakable Man community, um, within our 4 week getting started course. It's the first topic, and it's the first topic in almost all of the cohorts we run, mainly to for that one reason of this is a culture of manhood that we exist within, and it's adaptive. Like it's not, it wouldn't exist if it was truly a negative thing, right? If it was destructive in all forms, it wouldn't exist. It would end itself. Right. And so it is adaptive. Like there's so many constructive qualities to that box that we live in as, and that we all coexist with, right? No matter if we feel like we're a part of it or we live our life trying to get out of it. Um, but to me, it's about acknowledging that there is one and being in that space the way that you just did, of like, these are, and then differentiation, power versus force, right? Like having that power to be with that, and being skillful in when you choose to apply force knowing that when I apply this force, it's just going to beget more force and it's just going to make things worse. But at times, like men have been called on to be the ones to stand there and to be that boundary, right?
Mhm.
And hold it, and that's real. And even as like I share that, I'm thinking about an NPR, I think it was on the Daily. Just they've been doing some amazing reporting about the war that is going on right now, and they shared about a group of refugees on a train being asked for all the men to leave the train and stay behind to protect their motherland, their homeland. And you notice how we call it their motherland,
Mhm.
right? Like, right, to be there. And how like this is we're creating spaces for men to become more powerful, more dynamic. Not this isn't weakness, being vulnerable, right? But at the same time, our culture still at times really does, like, from your own life experience every day, like, not, I know for me it's like, uh am I ignoring something that I'm afraid of doing in my relationship, right? Am I shirking that responsibility to, and I'm going to say, man up to bring it in, like to just do that difficult thing that then creates a space where my fiance can trust me, right? And can be in her feminine and can relax, right? Or am I shirking that responsibility,
Mhm.
right? And I see that in the men getting off a train, being asked to hold that responsibility for everyone else, women and children.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great example and a tough example of what's happening in Ukraine right now. And I mean, there's a lot there of, yeah, to be asked to fight for something that perhaps you don't even know what the deeper cause is that you're being asked to fight for there. Other than,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the direct, like you say, there's a train filled with women and children, and there's that direct, tangible um,
Cultural.
culture, yeah, like the protection that's needed there for that. And then
Mm-hmm.
to be someone who's like you, like here shirtless in Nicaragua, back from a surf
Yeah.
session this morning, it's like, part of me is so grateful for my experience, and part of me also feels angry and helpless and frustrated that I don't have some sort of a responsibility to protect or to help in this huge issue that's happening in our world right now.
And
Yeah.
yet, like, let's both like take a breath and feel it. And what are you doing there when you say, like, part of me is feeling appreciative of what I have, and a part of me is feeling angry and upset? What are you doing? Like,
Yeah, I'm acknowledging the that I'm a complex being and my psyche is made up of multiple different characters. There's Braedyn, who's a 31-year-old man who exists in this moment as I am. And then there
mhm,
are a number of other pieces of me. Some of them are archetypical. They play out commonly in all of us. And some of the parts of me come from my very specific experience of going through my life and being wounded, or having, yeah, kind of deeper experiences that caused me to create a part of myself that wanted to protect that inner child. And that's kind of the internal
mhm,
family systems piece. And what even what we were just talking about of those two kind of different pieces in the man box, that we were mentioning, of this like tenderness, and then this also kind of power wielding side. And you mentioned, like, we don't want to suppress, or we might be uncomfortable with holding one of those
mhm,
pieces. And I think that's the big thing, that when we try and suppress a part of ourself which exists there, and we try and disconnect from that part of self, that is where like shadow starts to come out. And that's the
mhm,
thing, that like, can we bring awareness to all the different parts of myself and just give them the space to be heard and to be seen for what they are, and from that point then come back to self, come back to me today, to Chris today, after hearing from all these different parts, and then make the decision that's best for the kingdom as a whole.
Mm. And to just honor that, like how incredibly beautiful and challenging and real, and I want to put challenging and beautiful together, right? Because it's creative, it's awe inspiring, like appreciation and fear, and it's a path of discovery. It's right, like you're, I think one of the things that I notice in this work with self leadership is like we aren't. I am learning through you. I like when you share your practice in discovering these parts. Like another thing that I repeatedly want to bring to light for men who are listening to this is that like notice how you needed the we actually need challenge in our environment to help us find these parts. And so like when we conjured the memory or the idea or the vision of the what's happening in our world, it placed a finger on a place inside you and inspired one of those protectors to come to the surface. And you are aware of parts and allowing yourself to have parts. And so instead of unconsciously repressing that part and just shoving it down and maybe do it using a story to explain it away, you had the ability to at least acknowledge its presence and to sense that there might be another piece, another part, and that those things both exist, and that it's your work to allow them to be with them in a way and parent them in a way. And you might mess up in a way, right? Like every parent messes up, right? But that in and of itself is you learning, right? I don't mean to share too much of what I see in you, but this is like my way of making this into teaching moments, right?
Yeah.
Like a man who might not see you might just be listening.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I would offer, just for anyone who's, even has an inkling when you hear this, or recognize that, oh yeah, there are times where I have kind of conflicted feelings or conflicted thoughts of a certain situation, and that even as challenging as it may be, like you said, that challenge is something often has beauty in it. And so to be able to recognize that, yeah, some of these feelings are challenging, but whatever is happening inside of you is there to protect you in a way and to serve you in a way. And so building that relationship with yourself and with myself, with ourselves, is the thing that is most important to me. And it's to like get to know all these parts, because there is a way that they can be useful and they can bring their power to the world that maybe we just haven't discovered yet. And that takes time. It's like any relationship, right? It takes time to nurture.
Yeah.
And we might fuck up.
Right. And we learn through seeing the result, right? There's the view, the practice, and the result. And so realizing that like my intuition isn't a fixed thing. Like I'm engaging with that sense and polling and discerning through my life and seeing like, oh, instead of unconsciously reacting to these scripts, I'm dropping into it. And I'd say the teaching that's most important here, that is like a left or a right, I would say, in this work. I feel like I've reached a point in my own practice of doing this work for the past 10 years to be like, there are some left and right turns, right? Like, and one of the left versus right turns is when you notice that story in your head, or you notice tension in your body, or you notice any form of tension, right? Because everything, it's always from a subtle sense of tension in the body. It's what am I feeling? Where do I feel it in my body? What is that part? What does that need? What do I need? And almost like every time I bring this up, there's like this story in my head that pops up of like, no, don't do that. Right. Like how could answering those questions possibly solve the problem that I'm having right now? I must be able to intellectually figure this out. Right. Like for me, it's a problem related to running a small business and wanting to make time for my fiance and I, right? And to get out of my head thinking about running a men's coaching practice and a growing community. There's a part of me that thinks if I sit down and plan stuff well enough, these things won't happen. I won't feel overwhelmed in my schedule, right? And it's just not true.
Yeah.
It's just not true. And it's constant reminder to come back to my practice, come back to what is it, what am I feeling, where do I feel in my body, what do I need, and then seeing all of the different ways I've tried to manipulate my life to not feel that way.
Mm.
Right, all those ways of being. Do you have it, has that come up for you in your
Oh,
own practice?
yeah, totally. And I think, yeah, I love that you kind of defined it as that option to go left or right. And for sure,
Yeah.
I mean, still regularly feeling that, yeah, that contraction in my body. And I want to reach to something that can just numb or distract, put on Netflix or call someone or have sex or, get high, reach to
Man, I
something.
wish my addiction was to have sex. That would change. That would fix so many things in my relationship. No.
Yeah, I mean, more sex is probably good overall for everyone, but when it's an addiction, I don't know if it's a good
Well,
thing.
let's talk about that, right? Like let's use that as like an example, right? Like here, I think we could explore two different ones. Like, what is do you have any examples of impulses or addictions that are on the spectrum of being an addiction, but could also be considered constructive coping for you, self-soothing, right? Like within that range of actually being constructive.
Mm, yeah,
And
absolutely.
it's about the way that you do it, not that you're doing it. It's like how you do it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's a great question. For me, what comes up there is like a self love practice, a self pleasure practice, and so on one hand, pun intended.
On one hand, yes, yes.
uh, I can go in and masturbate in order to, yeah, get that rush of dopamine and these things that happen when I have an orgasm. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like maybe I just throw porn on and it's a few minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just something to distract and to bring pleasure, and to also, it ends up depleting me of my energy a little bit. And then there's
Mm-hmm.
another side of self pleasure that can be me taking an hour out of my day and to spend time massaging my body and using breath and sound and touch and movement to explore the sensations of my body and what it feels like to really love myself in the ways that I might love a woman, and to pour that into my own body and to explore the parts of myself beyond just my genitals that feel nice to be held and to be touched and to squeeze, and yeah, to allow me to like move energy and explore this beautiful body that I have, instead of just having it all focused in this one area while I'm also being distracted by a porn flick in front of me too. So it's a very different
Yeah.
experience between those two.
How do you know the difference?
It's how I feel afterwards, and
Ooh,
the feedback that I get from that after.
how
Yeah,
I feel afterwards.
yeah. Even
Yeah.
sometimes, I mean, now for me, I think it comes up while engaging in it, not just after. Like
Yeah.
there's a piece of me that knows during a time that I'm just masturbating to get one off, that there's a little piece of guilt in there, and I can kind of feel that already. And then again,
Mm-hmm.
that's uncomfortable. So I'm just ignoring that. And I'm like, yeah, but I just want to, get pleasured. It's
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. And then,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I mean,
So,
it's so just to bring attention to your answer was it's how I feel,
mhm.
right? And it's even as I say that, I just like rub my fingers and my hands together, and it's just like it's bringing men's attention from external, from my energy and awareness is external on the object in front of me, whether that be with porn and on a mobile phone or on your computer or on your TV, or whether that be with an externalized image, right? Like you're in the shower and you're fantasizing about an experience that you have conjured or you've made up in your mind, which is an escape, right? It maybe comes uh, from maybe a person in your life, or maybe like a celebrity, or a pornography, right? But then that extends into how we are being. Like, where is our awareness being placed while we're with ourselves or a partner, right? Like if you're with your partner and your entire experience of sexual like intercourse and intimacy is to act out an idea on them, right? And I want to just be careful, like there is even constructive forms of that, right? Like you can be in a kinky relationship and you can together come up with fantasies and a whole play, like a whole way to interact together. But that is done in collaboration, right? Like
Mhm.
there's agreements being made and there's communication being made so that one partner can be dominant and one can be submissive, right? And it's very, in your example, just to alliterate this and to show the difference for me, it's like I'll pick something that's not masturbation, running. Like for me as a young man, no one in the world would ever complain about me running too much,
Yeah.
right? Like as a young man with ADD and a really difficult, challenging, abusive relationship with my mother that I didn't know I could talk about, that I didn't know I should have had boundaries around, right? That I held with a really like just polarizing home environment. Running for me was a way to bring purpose to my life and to escape where I was and to let go of energy and right, and to express anger in a constructive way. But
Mhm.
as I developed in my own practice of self-leadership, there's absolutely a difference between going for a 10-mile run and trying to escape my life, right? Because I'm afraid to do something in my business or to take a risk or to have a conversation with my partner. And
Mhm.
like it's about, to me, it's that same thing of the felt awareness of where is my awareness going,
Mhm.
right? Like it is what I'm doing, because that once we really get into our self leadership practice, like everything is an impulse,
Mhm.
right? Like everything's an addiction. Like I'm addicted to saying I'm Chris Wilson, right? And I'm a men's coach, right? Like at
Yeah.
a certain point, that becomes like a thing that you just keep saying, and I have to actually drop in out of that and realize I'm a human being and just allow myself to be as I am. But I will also say for me, like with masturbation and pornography specifically, I went through like a 5 year tectonic shift when I quit my job in software sales and when I was going through my own dark night of the soul, and before I identified as being a men's coach and I was just getting into men's work, where the environmental aspect of the accessibility of pornography,
Hmm.
it wasn't even about pornography. It was literally like coffee, where I was working alone from home with like lots of different on off periods,
Yeah.
and pornography specifically fit, and quick masturbation like specifically fit this adrenaline, this hormonal, just like quick fix
Yeah.
thing that is just so addictive. And it almost needed to get to that point for me to then have to go through a stage of shame and to acknowledge that shame and to bring it into being guilt. And I didn't have these tools back then, right? Like I
Yeah.
didn't have a community of men in my life. But the only way out was to start to bring awareness to it and actually allow myself to feel what I was feeling, and to feel that, like, to be like, wow, do I feel good right now? Like, is this actually giving me a good sense anymore?
Hmm.
And it was absolutely, what I can only imagine for anyone with drug addiction, of transitioning from the drug bringing enthusiasm or novelty into your life or expansiveness, and then seeking more, right?
Hmm.
Like needing more pornography, needing it faster, different, and now knowing what how to. There's this thing called a shame flip, or a guilt flip, where you
Hmm.
flip shame into guilt, because shame is the emotion that says I am a bad person, or if
Hmm.
I did this I wouldn't be allowed in the tribe. And I acknowledged that guilt with a friend, like the feeling of feeling ashamed of it. And
Hmm.
he expressed a similar thing that had happened in his life. I had never expected it. And it just became like something I didn't want anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And now to be talking with men about masturbating and feeling your body, right? Like there's a difference.
Mm.
But I'll
Totally.
still say porn isn't necessarily bad.
Yeah, no, I think like you point to, right? It's the relationship that you're having with that and coming back to how do we feel in this space? Because like you said, like you start to got to a point where you could actually like feel that there was something that was not in alignment or did not feel wholesome for you in that experience, and it brought you to that point of like feeling shame in your body and being able to notice that. And so it's not porn that's the bad thing there. It's not alcohol or weed that's the bad thing for a drug addict. It's that relationship that we've built and how the feedback we're getting in our body is relating to that. And so I just love that it's driving home that point that you mentioned earlier too, of like needing that challenge almost to invite a deeper level of connection and intimacy with your own feelings and your own body. And it's beautiful how these things happen if we can be open to it and explore that relationship a little more. I think those are the two most valuable questions I could ever ask myself, and most of the relationships outside of me are, what do you feel and what do you need? And yeah, I just love that you mentioned that.
What do you say to guys? Like, what would you say to a man who listens to this and just, I don't know, just feels completely lost, or uh, disconnected from it? Like, where do I even start?
Yeah, I mean, starting can sometimes be the most challenging part, so I can
Yeah.
understand where that confusion would be. And I think what comes up for me first is to maybe invite like a sense of play, if there's anything possible there, of like this is a laboratory that we're living in. And so perhaps you have this experience and feel confused, but that's the excitement of getting to explore more and getting to try
Hmm.
different things, and maybe opening up this sense of like, okay, I get to experiment now and learn something different than what I've already experienced, and just come into that like childlike sense of curiosity and playfulness. And then yeah, to like start, like you pointed to, I'd say speak about it first with someone who you can trust. that you feel safe with, that you can open up to and share your experience and say, look, I don't need you to tell me, that how to fix this problem. I just need space to share it and to be heard and to be shown that I'm still loved. And like, that's a beautiful first step that opens up many doors, as it did for you, right? It gave
Hmm.
you the same flip.
And then I see like how you and I met, right? Like investing in yourself and being in that program, like both of those both of those pieces of guidance are invites like to play, right? Like this curiosity, um, it for me, and that it just reminds me of the qualities of self, of being curious and compassionate and connected, confident, not confident in something external, but just like grounded confidence, right?
Hmm.
And then that automatically invites curiosity, creativity to come to the surface, and then that's playful, right? And purposeful, and right, and
Hmm.
present. And
Yeah.
so all of these things happen from being in that self. And yet I just want to like appreciate that there's just so many, like we're just not aware of this as young men, as even as a 38-year-old man or a 50-year-old man. Like very few of us have had the opportunity to um to be witnessed and to be received, and within the container of a group of human beings who have the skills to be with you in any and all states,
Hmm.
right? And so I like if you don't have someone who you feel like you can trust, right? Like that's that's pretty normal, right? Like
Yeah.
a lot of people don't have someone they can trust, but that's why like follow that and go out and find it. And I think that's the to me that something I'd like to add in of like personal responsibility. Like you're the only one who can do this work, and you do actually have to listen to that, take responsibility for it, and then make attempts in your life to design your life and in relationships to invite that in.
Well, and that's where
Call
we
Braedyn.
Yeah, like I was just gonna say, a shameless plug of for both of us, like holding those communal spaces where you
Yeah.
can create those deep, trusting, connected relationships with other men, where you will have a safe space to be heard and to allow yourself to open up to transformation. Like it exists, it's everywhere. Whether you want to do it one on one, in a group, but there are so many opportunities, and we are just two of many. And so, yeah, like you say, there's a personal responsibility there, and don't start by selling yourself short, saying it's hard or there aren't possibilities. Like it all exists out there. You just have to look a
Yeah.
little.
Yeah. And I do think that I mean, I don't think it's shameless at all, man. Like, and it isn't a shameless, it's a totally shameless plug. Like that's why we're having these conversations, right?
Yeah.
Like I really, I'm constantly reminded by, couple of the different books that have really shaped my own practice of cutting through spiritual materialism is one of them.
Hmm.
And he regularly talks about how these teachings, like these group work practices, these meditative tools, the tantric wisdom, Zen wisdom, that people think it's a secret. Like these are ancient secret teachings. And
Yeah.
it's not that they're ancient secret teachings. It's that the only way you can pass them on is through one-on-one physical interaction, right? Or what we're finding now is you can pass it on through an audio recording of listening to a person's practice, and through the human voice we have a nervous system response, right?
Mhm.
Much less so with video. Actually, like the audio allows us to drop out of being worried about what we look like or what that person looks like, and actually falling into pointing into our own experience. And I think that there's an actual like saboteur story in men's heads of like, am I being sold? Am I going to, is this person selling me on something? Am I going to become a part of a cult? Right? Like all of these things, these protective mechanisms, right?
Yeah.
But I, but when you fall into the work from a place of curiosity, right?
Mm-hmm.
From a place of having something happen in your life, like your life brings you here, there are communities of men that are specifically existing, that specifically exist for the sole purpose of creating a container to practice together. And you run one. I run one.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to make sure that the guys are realizing and getting that message that like these places are available to them.
Yeah. And open to all. Like what I love you said is like whether you're 30, 38, 50. I mean, I was just on a tantric, like sacred sexuality retreat a couple of weeks ago, and I spent some time with a 72-year-old man and had such a deep conversation where I was able to hold space and open insights for him that, you know, he had never had before. And like the gratitude and the acceptance that he felt in that moment was so beautiful for both of us to experience. And like that's what's happening, you know, on a regular basis within these containers that I'm holding. And I'm sure for you too, like it's there's like real transformation that's happening, and it happens, yeah, not in these secret mystical ways. It's a very human thing that comes
Yeah.
from the heart, typically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's real magic,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just, what I notice is like that there is a commitment though, right? Like you, the spiritual shopping mall. Like just this morning, I was on a community welcome call with a man in our community who's brand new, and the calls are for no other purpose but to just welcome men in. If they want to schedule one, they can. And he asked like what do you say to trying different things, right? Like I've never really heard about this. I just went through a divorce, and my friend who lives in California introduced me to a men's group, and I just started going, but I want to go to this one too. What do you say to that? And I'm like, dude, like explore, right? Like explore, and then feel what you feel connected to, and then realize that there is a challenge in our environment of the spiritual shopping mall, and that eventually you need to make a commitment to a practice to go deeper.
Mhm.
But you'll feel that when you notice yourself bouncing from community to community, not going deeper, right? But right now, how does it feel? Right? And
Yeah.
that's like, oh, it feels good. Great. Keep going. Then just enjoy that, because like follow that, trust that feeling.
Hmm.
And then when it doesn't feel good, what am I feeling? What do I feel in my body? What do I need?
Yeah, and it comes back to that piece we touched on earlier, that anything can become that addiction, right? With that spiritual shopping mall, that it can be. And for me, it did become something where it's consume, consume, consume. Like I get this rush of the dream that I can imagine for myself. And then instead of doing the work to make that dream come to reality, I just keep consuming information. And then
Hmm.
I start to feel in my body like, wow, I kind of feel overwhelmed, and I feel like I'm not really taking action. I feel kind of in the same space that I have been for the last little while. I feel unsatisfied, and
Oh,
so it's like a check and balance of like, okay, you know, what do I need right now? Well, I don't need more information. I have enough right now.
yeah.
What I need is to practice the things and see what sticks, because I read something today just talking about, you know, the 5 a.m. club, and uh, one of my clients was, you know, wanting like, I got to be up at 5. I got to do the meditation and the breath work, and it's
Oh
like,
man.
you know, have you tried this? Because when you do, it sounds like you feel tired and it's not sustainable. And like, I get that it works for other people, but it really sounds like it's not working for you. And that's okay. You know, listen to your
Yeah.
body, listen to the feedback.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's such a beautiful teacher, right? Like the can we talk about this? Can we go for another 10 minutes? I'm on for this subject.
Yeah,
Like
for sure.
like in your own practice, right? Like noticing uh that you are consuming, right? And that you're not taking action outside of those spaces. There's this another wonderful book to cynicism and magic, also cutting through spiritual materialism. Like I think like the and the practice of pure awareness. Like these, like the common thread I would say between those three things for me in this, like, is very similar. I know as like a coach, my to make the transition from um, serving and showing up as a coach, where I went through this period of discovery of feeling what it stumbling on what it meant um, to meet a man, to discover, hold space for him, to have the skills to help him connect with what he needs or what his specific challenge in his life is right then, and then to move from there into a coaching relationship. I learned how to move through that process and how to show up as myself and how to um, I almost said balance, but really to just have it be a sustainable, um, almost like baking bread, right? Like I really feel like I always come back to this idea of being a baker, right? Like baking bread, you got to wake up in the morning to bake the bread by a certain time so that people can buy it,
Hmm.
right? And so your life shapes around being that baker, right? I grew up in a restaurant. That's how my dad would grow up, how things were, and there's fundamental grounded things that like of our experience of our life, that like physical energy of like I only have so many hours in a day, I only have so much time to do stuff, I need to rest. And I learned how to do that, and it
Hmm.
took like 5 years of practice to really settle into that, right? But then when it became a community, when men started forming around those experiences and we started to do more group activities, I didn't know how to set boundaries.
Hmm.
I didn't know how to I didn't even know I needed to say no, because it felt good. Like it felt like, hey, isn't growing, isn't having more men coming into the space. And then I started to feel like I had thoughts of things like that I didn't do, or like, oh, I need to reply to this person. I need to reply to this person. I need to do this. I need to do that. I need to do this. Like, do I know what I need to do? Is there something I forgot to do? Right.
Hmm.
And that whole thing started to turn into like this festering, like weight.
Yeah.
Right. And it became challenging. And my response to it was what my protector of that young man to be ruthless and aggressive, who learned to race bikes and to like make an annual training plan to fucking kill it. And
Hmm.
did you do the workout, right? Like did you do that workout? But I think like the thing about this is like, to make this final point, is that because these spaces are empty, because this work is all about creating an empty space to see yourself in, whether it's practicing breath work, whether it's practicing meditation, whether it's sitting with a coach, whether it's sitting in a men's group, I could feel all that tension in those spaces and it was ruining it,
Hmm.
right? Like I could feel just like, oh, like it's so, I'm so happy to be here. This doesn't feel, I felt like I was just staring at my computer for 4 hours. And then it's like, well, what actions do I need to take outside of this space to align my life with that? And you know, it was the hardest thing to do. The hardest thing to do is to start saying, you know what? I really love coaching. Like
Hmm.
I love spending one-on-one time with a small group of men. And
Hmm.
you know what? Like, I actually have to say no to running this community. Like, I can't do it.
Yeah.
My heart, like there's no other replacement for two human beings dropping in together and going deep into something and working through that. And there's no replacement for that. And my palms are sweaty right now.
Mm.
And, I tears like right now, of how hard it was to say that to a community of men that I felt like I had to do something for, right?
Mhm.
But then when I said that, a group of guys were like, "Hey, we can be stewards. Like we'll help out. Like let us know what we need to do." It's like giving that over to them, right?
Yeah.
Like learning to let that go, right? And that's really us brings me to where I am today, like learning to let to communicate and to give up that and to share it, to just be like, hey, and not just shut it down,
Mhm.
but like, and it, to me, that's a whole practice in this work, right? Like to expand.
Yeah, and I'm sure that experience in itself has its whole multitude of emotions and boundaries and desires and things that come up for you when that transition's happening. And like, yeah, that's your
It is
baby.
happening.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is what has been my work, is in realizing that it's not, even if it was my baby and it is my, like the garden that I get to till, but it's not, I don't want to hold on to it
Yeah.
and hold it back, right? I there the rumination, the stories in my head, the automatic negative thinking has just skyrocketed for a while,
Hmm.
right? And it was so noticeable that there were parts that were being attacked,
Hmm.
right? These were parts attacks, like fear, insecurity, doubt, shame. All of this stuff came back in my practice, right? And then for me, as a guy, I'm host of the Unshakable Man podcast. Like I was like, come on, man, like what the heck, right? Like what is going on? But it's like that's not my. I'm not living this as if I'm a dude that know that some like I'm not floating around like in some fake universe.
Yeah.
Like this is my work. So
Well, I think the beautiful piece that comes up for me, just to like tie that up for me, it feels like, in any relationship, whether it's with your business or your career or, a friend, a partner, and there's transformation that is knocking on the door, or, something that wants to die or let go or transform. And that space, there can be a desire to attach, to like keep things as they are and to feel uncomfortable about the change. And then again, like coming back into that tenderness, the softness of the body, and acknowledging what those parts are saying and what they need. And also opening up to the idea that you can let go and that there's something new to come of this, and that the world will support what is needed. A group of men will come and tell you that they can steward the thing that you're letting go of, but you can't get that group of men to come if you're tightly holding on, right?
right. Yeah, actually you're pushing them away, like not
Mm-hmm.
letting them help. Right. And I mean, is this, and then to bring it in full circle, boundaries and creativity. Is this say more, say more.
I mean, yeah, it is. It's that masculine and feminine energy, right? It's the, where do you need to create the structure and the container in your life, so that in that container you feel safe, and in that space of safety you can be playful, you can be creative, you can let this very feminine energy flow in such a beautiful way. And like paying attention to that balance, because as we know, things change, and so sometimes that container might need to be a little more tight, it might need to be a little more rigid, and the amount of time for creativity might not be as expansive. And sometimes you might not need minimal boundaries. For me, that's kind of where I've been in the last year. Is there's so much emotion, so much loss that I experienced in the last couple of years, that my heart was like, I need to grieve. I need to cry, to scream, to be supported by nature, to stop listening to these city sounds all the time. And, to just be able
Hmm.
to expand and be creative. And so I had to give myself a container for that. And that was coming down here to Nicaragua and spending this time here and detaching from the need to like produce and do and achieve, and that it's okay to just like I'm achieving a lot by connecting more intimately with my emotions and my heart and my body. And like that is the boundaries that I needed to listen to. And now I'm starting to feel again like, okay, we've grieved, we've moved through a lot. Now I kind of feel more of a call to start creating and putting things out in the world and
Hmm.
sharing and having beautiful
Hmm.
conversations like this. And that requires a little more structure, a little more masculine energy and boundaries. And so like
Hmm.
learning to flow and be open to that instead of always be stuck in one or the other. It's a valuable practice for sure.
That's awesome, man. Uh, it's such a joy just getting to chat with you, Braedyn. And where can listeners find you?
Yeah, I've got a website, braedynstockfish.com. You can find me on Instagram there as well. And with the Grounded Man, the community that we run online and based out of Ottawa, it's at the Grounded Man on Instagram and thegroundedman.com. So any of those
Awesome.
places, reach out. Would love to connect.
Is there anything specific with the Grounded Man, like a way that men can get started, or like just dip their toe in?
Yeah, we run a monthly kind of an open house, we call it. So once a month, yeah, there's an open space where some of our existing members come in, some past members, and then anyone in the community who wants to explore can pop in. So you can sign up for that on the website. And then we've also got one-on-one kind of calls, like welcome calls, just like you mentioned, where we can chat a little more if there are specific questions or things like that we can get into for sure. So there's a calendar link there to follow.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, it's such an awesome opportunity to just get to be with you. I'm loving the birds in the background. And how long until you go surfing next?
Tomorrow morning.
Okay. All
So
right.
yeah.
This is what jealousy feels like. I'm gonna
Well,
have to go jump in. I'm gonna have to go jump in our 52-degree water here on Ocean Beach in San Francisco and play in the waves with my fiance, who just got her first longboard that's sitting in the hallway. So
oh wow, that's so exciting.
yeah, yeah, that we're gonna make that happen this week. Not in the
Wim,
next 24 hours, but
Wim Hof will be proud of the water temperature.
yeah, exactly, exactly. I grew up in cold water, so way before Wim Hof, Chris was playing in the waves in cold water, training his nervous system.
It's
All right, man. Thank you so much for your time, energy, and thank you for devoting that to this work, man. It's just an honor to get to share space with other fellow holders of space for men, and we need more of you.
Thank you so much, brother, and thank you for the invitation to be here to share this conversation. Such a pleasure, and I look forward to connecting soon, man.
Bye.
Take care.